Imagine a battlefield, a symphony of chaos where courage is measured in bullets fired and lives taken. Now imagine a man, unarmed, refusing to touch a weapon, yet running towards the fray, not away. This is not a fable. This is the true story of Desmond Doss, a man whose extraordinary valor redefined heroism in the crucible of war. He was a beacon of unwavering faith in a world consumed by conflict, a testament to the power of conviction against overwhelming odds. Before we delve deeper into his incredible journey, if you find stories of unwavering human spirit and profound moral courage inspiring, please take a moment to subscribe and join our community. Your support helps us share more narratives that truly matter. Born in Lynchburg, Virginia in 1919, Desmond Thomas Doss was raised in a devout Seventh-day Adventist home, a faith that deeply impressed upon him the sanctity of life and the paramount importance of the Ten Commandments. From a young age, the lessons of "Thou shalt not kill" and the observance of the Sabbath as a day of rest and worship were not mere suggestions, but foundational pillars of his existence. His mother, Bertha, played a pivotal role, nurturing his spiritual growth and instilling in him a profound respect for God's Word, a respect that would later guide his every decision, even in the face of unimaginable pressure. This upbringing wasn't just about dogma, it was about cultivating a compassionate heart and an unshakable moral compass. The story of Cain and Abel, depicted in a framed picture in his childhood home, profoundly impacted young Desmond. It illustrated the devastating consequences of violence and reinforced his commitment to non-aggression. He saw the inherent value in every human life, a belief that transcended nationality, uniform, or ideology. This wasn't a passive pacifism. It was an active commitment to preserving life. Born from a deep understanding of his faith's teachings, he believed his purpose was not to take life, but to save it, a vow forged not in a moment of crisis, but steadily built through years of spiritual devotion and personal reflection, long before the shadow of global war loomed. His faith also taught him the principle of service, that true devotion to God manifested through service to humanity. While his personal convictions forbade him from carrying a weapon or taking a life, he understood his duty to his country. He believed he could contribute meaningfully, not as a combatant, but as a medic, a healer. This wasn't a loophole in his beliefs. It was an authentic expression of them. He envisioned himself on the front lines, not with a rifle, but with bandages and a stretcher, tending to the wounded, irrespective of who they were or what side they fought for. This internal resolve was a quiet defiance, a radical act of peace in a world preparing for total war. As the drumbeat of World War II grew louder, calling young men from every corner of America to arms, Desmond Doss found himself at a crossroads unique in its moral complexity. How does a man whose entire being is predicated on saving lives, and whose faith prohibits him from even touching a weapon, reconcile this with the demands of military service? His vow, "Thou shalt not kill," was about to be tested in the most brutal crucible imaginable, the Pacific Theater. This wasn't just a physical battle he was preparing for, but a profound spiritual and ethical one, a lonely stand against societal expectations and military doctrine, setting the stage for an extraordinary chapter in human history. Then came December 7th, 1941. The devastating attack on Pearl Harbor plunged America into World War II, igniting a national call to arms. Young men, driven by patriotism, flocked to enlist. For Desmond Doss, this presented an agonizing crucible. He was a patriot, loving his country fiercely, yet his faith, the bedrock of his existence, prohibited taking a human life. How could he reconcile the urgent call to defend his homeland with the unwavering commandment, "Thou shalt not kill"? His answer, born from intense prayer and profound introspection, was not to evade conflict, but to confront it on his own terms. Desmond chose to serve not with a rifle, but with a medic's kit. He would be a conscientious objector, willing to face enemy bullets and battlefield horrors, but only to save lives, never to take them. This was immense courage, a bold declaration that his commitment to God superseded secular demands, while still fulfilling his duty. He envisioned himself a healer amidst the chaos, a beacon of hope. This unusual proposition, however, met profound resistance from military authorities. The U.S. Army, a machine built for war, struggled to comprehend a soldier refusing a weapon. Doss was seen as an anomaly, a potential liability, his request viewed with deep suspicion. Officers questioned his sincerity, loyalty, even sanity. They offered deferments, urged him to change his mind, but Desmond stood firm. His quiet resolve was an impenetrable shield. He wasn't asking for an easy path. He demanded the right to serve by his conscience, a concept alien to wartime command. The skepticism wasn't confined to officers. Among his fellow recruits, Desmond became an instant pariah. He was mocked, ridiculed, ostracized, labeled a coward, a slacker, an unpatriotic zealot. They couldn't fathom a man going to war unarmed, believing he risked their lives. The barracks became hostile, filled with taunts and veiled threats. His refusal to train with a rifle, to handle a weapon, set him apart, making him an easy target for resentment. He was a square peg, an outsider in a brotherhood forged in combat. Yet through it all, Desmond Doss remained unshaken. His faith, far from a weakness, was his ultimate strength. He endured relentless bullying, court-martial threats, and constant pressure with quiet dignity. He knew his path was unconventional, fraught with peril, but believed it was God's path. He wasn't afraid of death, but terrified of violating his conscience. This unwavering commitment, this profound moral courage against overwhelming opposition, was not merely admirable. It was a premonition of the extraordinary heroism he would soon display, a testament to one man's conviction against war's tide. Doss arrived at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, a place designed to forge soldiers in a crucible of discipline. For Desmond, however, this crucible would test not just his physical endurance, but the very core of his being. His declaration as a conscientious objector meant he would not carry a weapon, a fundamental tool of war, nor would he train on the Sabbath. These were non-negotiable tenets of his existence, and in the rigid world of military indoctrination, they were seen as affronts, acts of defiance that threatened unit cohesion and military effectiveness. The moment he stood firm on these principles, the gauntlet was thrown. Doss became an immediate pariah. Fellow recruits, conditioned to view any deviation as weakness, saw him not as a man of conviction but as a coward, a liability. The barracks, once a shared space, transformed into a hostile environment. Taunts and jeers became his daily soundtrack. "Coward," they'd spit. "Doss, you're not a soldier." His refusal to touch a rifle, even in training, was met with disbelief and open contempt. They couldn't fathom a man who wanted to serve but wouldn't fight. The bullying wasn't just verbal. It escalated. Boots would accidentally trip him, punches would land by mistake, and his few possessions would vanish. His superiors, equally perplexed and frustrated by this anomaly, saw his unwavering stance as a direct challenge to authority. Drill sergeants, accustomed to absolute obedience, found themselves confronted by a quiet, polite, yet utterly immovable force. They tried every tactic: humiliation, threats, extra duties, hoping to break his spirit and force him to conform to military norms. The threats grew more severe, culminating in the specter of a court-martial. The military establishment, unsure how to handle a conscientious objector, insisting on serving but on his own terms, believed legal action might be the only way. Doss was accused of insubordination, dereliction of duty, undermining morale. Yet, through it all, his resolve remained unbroken. He would stand for hours, enduring the scorn, the isolation, the physical discomfort, his gaze firm, his spirit unyielding. His faith was not a shield, but the very bedrock that allowed him to endure, to stand alone against an entire system. This wasn't merely about refusing a weapon or observing the Sabbath. It was about an internal battle for his soul, a testament to the power of deeply held conviction. Desmond Doss was demonstrating a form of courage entirely alien to the battlefield training around him. He wasn't just not taking a life, he was choosing to live by a higher principle, even if it meant being despised, ridiculed, and threatened with imprisonment. In the midst of relentless scorn, his unshakable faith became his armor, proving that true strength sometimes lies not in the ability to wield a weapon, but in the unwavering commitment to one's moral truth. The relentless gauntlet of basic training, a crucible designed to forge soldiers, finally gave way to the grim reality of deployment. Despite the scorn, the threats, and the abuse, Desmond Doss emerged, strengthened in his resolve. His faith, once tested by comrades, now faced the ultimate trial, the brutal, unforgiving theater of the Pacific War. The whispers and taunts about the coward faded, replaced by the roar of transport ships carrying thousands of young men towards an unknown, terrifying destiny. This was not a drill. This was war, and Doss, the conscientious objector, was heading straight into its maw. Their destination was Okinawa, a seemingly idyllic island transformed into a hellscape. As ships approached, the air grew heavy with the stench of death and acrid gunpowder. The island groaned under relentless bombardment, a prelude to the bloodiest battle of the Pacific. The sheer scale of conflict was apparent, a vast armada converging on a small piece of land where the Japanese Imperial Army had dug in with terrifying resolve, determined to defend every inch to the last breath. The stakes were impossibly high, and every soldier knew it. Central to the American objective was the Maida Escarpment, a jagged 400-foot coral cliff known as Hacksaw Ridge. It was an impregnable fortress, a natural bastion reinforced with caves, tunnels, pillboxes, and machine gun nests. Scaling it seemed madness, a suicidal charge against an enemy entrenched in an almost vertical killing ground. From below it loomed, an ominous, unconquerable beast, daring any man to challenge its supremacy. Doss's 307th Regiment stared up at it with profound dread. The Japanese defenders, hardened veterans, embodied a fanatical resistance defying military logic. Their code of Bushido demanded death before surrender, transforming every soldier into a human shield, every cave into a tomb for both attacker and defender. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation and unwavering loyalty, often resorting to banzai charges and hidden traps that turned every step into a potential death sentence. This wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a brutal struggle against an enemy willing to pay any price in blood. For Doss the medic, his task was to save, not take lives. Staring at Hacksaw Ridge's terrifying precipice, knowing thousands would fall, his mission sharpened. He carried no weapon, only his medical kit and an unshakable belief in preserving life. The overwhelming odds, the promise of carnage, none deterred him. Instead, they fueled his resolve. He was about to step into the crucible, a lone, unarmed man against war's full fury, preparing for a day that would test courage, faith, and humanity. The order to advance shattered the morning stillness, instantly swallowed by the thunderous roar of artillery and the staccato crackle of Japanese machine guns. As the first American soldiers surged onto Hacksaw Ridge, they met a storm of lead and fire unlike anything they had anticipated. Explosions ripped through the air, tearing earth and flesh alike, turning the once daunting landscape into a maelstrom of shrapnel and screams. Men fell before they even fully cleared the escarpment, their hopes and lives extinguished in a blinding flash of violence. The ridge became a slaughterhouse in mere moments, the air thick with cordite and the metallic tang of blood. This wasn't a battle. It was an inferno. Amidst this absolute pandemonium where every instinct screamed for self-preservation, for cover, for retreat, one figure moved with a terrifying, almost surreal calm. Desmond Doss, unarmed, no rifle to offer even the illusion of defense, didn't hesitate. While his comrades scrambled for whatever meager shelter the exposed ridge offered, their weapons spitting defiance, Doss was already pushing forward, a solitary silhouette against the backdrop of war. His eyes, fixed not on the enemy but on the first fallen, scanned the ground for those in desperate need. He moved, not like a soldier advancing, but like a shepherd seeking his lost flock, utterly oblivious to the bullets tearing past him, the grenades detonating mere feet away. His actions, at first, were met with stunned disbelief by the very men who had scorned him. The battle raged with an unholy intensity, each minute stretching into an eternity of terror. Doss, a beacon of selfless courage, weaved through the chaos, a ghost in the crossfire. He crawled, ran, and ducked, not to avoid danger for himself, but to reach the next bleeding body. A young private, gut-shot, cried out for his mother, and Doss was there, his hands already tearing open a first aid kit, applying pressure, administering morphine to dull the excruciating pain. Another soldier, his leg mangled by shrapnel, lay exposed, and Doss, with surprising strength, dragged him behind a meager rock formation, shielding him with his own body as bullets chipped away at the stone. He patched, he comforted, he whispered words of hope, his presence a stark contrast to the brutal reality surrounding them. He was a medic, yes, but he was also a lifeline. The initial assault faltered, then crumbled under the sheer weight of Japanese resistance. American casualties mounted at a horrifying rate, the ridge becoming a testament to the futility of their charge. Yet, amidst the retreat and the agonizing cries of the wounded left behind, Doss remained. He was a singular force, a man possessed by his mission, moving from one fallen soldier to another, ignoring the withdrawal order, ignoring the impossible odds. His uniform, already stained with dirt and blood, was a constant presence, a silent promise to those who lay broken. The men who were able to observe him even from a distance began to grasp the true depth of his conviction. In the crucible of Hacksaw Ridge, under the searing heat of enemy fire, something shifted. The sneers and insults from basic training, the accusations of cowardice began to dissipate, replaced by a nascent, grudging respect. Soldiers who had mocked his faith and his refusal to carry a weapon now saw him, a defenseless man, deliberately placing himself in harm's way again and again to save their brothers. They watched him, a man of peace, perform acts of impossible bravery in a theater of war, and in those desperate moments, the seeds of a legend were sown. Desmond Doss was not just a medic. He was becoming something more profound, a living testament to an unwavering spirit. The Japanese, masters of defensive warfare, were far from broken. With a ferocity-defying belief, they launched a massive counter-offensive against the American lines. What had been a hard-won advance quickly devolved into a desperate struggle for survival. Shells rained down, grenades exploded, and the air was thick with screams and the staccato of machine gun fire. The enemy seemed to emerge from every crevice, every hidden tunnel, turning the ridge into an inferno. This was no mere pushback. It was a full-scale assault to reclaim every inch of ground, to annihilate the invaders. The ground, already soaked in blood, was poised to claim many more lives. Orders to retreat, a sound striking fear into the hearts of soldiers, echoed across the shattered landscape. The American lines, stretched thin and battered, began to buckle. Men scrambled back down the ropes and ladders, leaving behind the carnage and the impossible dream of holding the summit. The retreat was chaotic, a desperate scramble for survival, each man fighting his own battle against the overwhelming Japanese onslaught. The ridge, once a symbol of victory, now loomed as a death trap, a place where hope evaporated under a hail of enemy fire. Defeat and terror pressed down on every soldier, but amidst the panic and desperate flight, one man stood firm. Desmond Doss, the unarmed medic, watched in horror as his comrades descended, leaving behind dozens of wounded men, brothers in arms, bleeding out on the exposed rock face. To abandon them, to leave them to the mercy of the advancing Japanese, was an unthinkable act. His faith, his core belief in the sanctity of life, screamed in protest. He could not, would not, join the retreat. His duty, as he saw it, transcended military orders and personal safety. His place was here with the fallen, a solitary beacon of hope in a sea of despair. The decision was made in a heartbeat, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. He would stay, alone, on Hacksaw Ridge, facing certain death, with nothing but his medical kit and an unwavering conviction. The retreating soldiers, some who had mocked him, now looked back in disbelief, watching the lone figure remain amidst the chaos, a tiny defiant speck against the backdrop of war. It was an act of profound courage, a testament to an unbroken spirit. If you're finding inspiration in this extraordinary story, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us share these powerful narratives. As the last American forces vanished, a chilling silence descended, broken only by distant battle sounds and the moans of the injured. Doss was truly alone, a single man against an entire enemy force, tasked with saving lives where all others had fled. The sheer scale was overwhelming. Dozens of critically wounded men scattered across a treacherous, exposed battlefield, with Japanese soldiers likely just moments away. The sun began its slow descent, casting long, eerie shadows over the ridge, transforming the landscape into an even more menacing tableau. Desmond Doss had made his choice, and now the true test of his unwavering faith and courage was about to begin. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood and ash, leaving Hacksaw Ridge in a chilling, profound twilight. The brutal symphony of battle faded, replaced by the haunting groans of the wounded and the eerie silence that often precedes death. Doss stood amidst the carnage, a lone, resolute figure against the encroaching darkness, dozens of broken bodies around him. He had made his choice, a silent vow whispered to the heavens. He would not abandon them. The immense weight of that promise, the sheer impossibility of the task, settled upon his shoulders, but so too did an unshakable resolve fueled by faith. The immediate, terrifying challenge was the cliff face itself, a sheer, unforgiving drop of hundreds of feet, now his only escape, his only path to salvation for these men. He located the abandoned rope net, a tattered lifeline left behind in the hasty retreat, a providential sign. But how to get these men, many gravely injured, some barely conscious, to that precarious edge? He began with the closest, a young soldier with a shattered leg, his eyes wide with pain. Every movement was agony, every drag a Herculean effort against treacherous terrain, littered with debris and slick with blood. He wasn't just moving men, he was battling the ridge itself. Darkness, an uneasy ally, began to cloak his movements from unseen enemy patrols sweeping the ridge for stragglers. Yet it also magnified dangers, turning shadows into menacing specters, each rustle of leaves a potential threat. He would reach a man, assess his injuries with a medic's practiced touch, then, with incredible strength born of desperation, begin dragging him to the cliff edge. He spoke to them in soft, calming tones, offering reassurances and promises of rescue, even as his own breath came in ragged, desperate gasps. At the precipice, the true terror of his mission unfolded. One by one, he would carefully secure a man to the makeshift harness, a fragile connection between life and the abyss. Lowering them down the sheer rock face was a harrowing ballet of strength, precision, and fervent prayer. The rough rope bit deep into his hands. His muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed through searing pain, his gaze fixed on the descent, ensuring each precious life reached the bottom safely. "Lord, please help me get one more," became his constant, desperate plea, a mantra repeated with every soul he entrusted to the void. The hours blurred into a relentless, grueling cycle of search, drag, secure, and lower. The biting, cold night air seeped into his bones. Exhaustion gnawed at his resolve, but faint cries of "medic," or a soft moan from the darkness, was all the motivation he needed. He moved like a spectral figure, an angel of mercy amidst the horrors of war, defying all logic and human endurance. With each life saved, a fragile flicker of hope ignited in the desolate landscape, a powerful testament to one man's unwavering commitment to his fellow soldiers and to his God. His impossible mission had just begun. The night deepened, a suffocating blanket woven with the cries of the wounded and the distant echoes of battle. For Doss, each minute was an eternity, each rescue an act of monumental will. His muscles screamed, protesting every drag, lift, and careful adjustment of the rope he'd fashioned from stretchers and spare gear. The jagged rocks of Hacksaw Ridge, once merely obstacles, now seemed to conspire against him, tearing at his clothes, scraping his skin, mirroring the internal struggle against overwhelming fatigue. He moved like a ghost, a shadow amongst shadows, his only companions the moans of the injured and the silent, desperate pleas whispered into the unforgiving darkness, a personal liturgy against despair. The process was agonizingly slow, each descent a meticulous dance with gravity and death. He would secure a man, often unconscious or too weak to assist, to the makeshift harness, then slowly, painstakingly, lower them over the precipice. The smallest sound, a dislodged pebble, a creak of the rope, could betray his position to the Japanese patrols that roamed the ridge, their flashlights occasionally cutting through the gloom like predatory eyes. There were moments of heart-stopping terror, when he'd press himself against the cold rock, holding his breath, as enemy voices drifted unnervingly close, their footsteps crunching on the very ground he'd just traversed. Each time they passed, cold relief washed over him, quickly replaced by the renewed urgency of his mission. What fueled this superhuman effort? It was not brute strength alone, but an unyielding spirit forged in faith. With every man he moved, with every knot he tied, the same fervent prayer escaped his lips. "Please, Lord, help me get one more." It became his mantra, a rhythmic pulse against the encroaching darkness, a promise to himself and to the God he believed was guiding his every perilous step. He was a man possessed, not by madness, but by an unwavering conviction that he was merely an instrument, an extension of a greater purpose. The sheer scale of the task would have broken lesser men, But Doss found an infinite reservoir of strength in his spiritual resolve, transforming fear into almost divine focus. As the night wore on, the impossible began to take shape. One by one, then 2, then 5, then 10, the injured soldiers, previously left for dead, were carefully lowered to safety. The tally, once an abstract and unimaginable goal, started to become a staggering reality. Each successful rescue, a small miracle in itself, added to a growing testament of courage and sacrifice. Doss didn't pause to count or to celebrate. There was no time for anything but the next man, the next prayer, the next treacherous descent. Yet, in the back of his mind, a silent, almost disbelieving count was forming, a number that would later defy all military logic and human expectation. He was utterly exhausted, his body screaming for rest, his mind a haze of adrenaline and raw determination. Yet, he continued, the sheer odds of his survival, let alone his success, was zero. Under constant threat of discovery, amidst the chaos of a battlefield, a single unarmed medic was systematically retrieving the fallen one by one. It was a defiance of every rule of engagement, every tactical strategy, every expectation of human endurance. An unseen hand, a profound spiritual conviction, seemed to guide his every move, protecting him from discovery, granting him strength beyond his physical limits. The night of miracles continued, a solitary figure against an army, proving that sometimes the greatest power lies not in weapons but in unbreakable will and unwavering faith. The first rays of dawn, hesitant and pale, began to pierce the lingering darkness over Hacksaw Ridge. As the mist slowly lifted, revealing the scarred landscape, a scene of profound wonder began to unfold at the cliff's base. Below, waiting medical teams and relieved soldiers, who had spent the night in anxious anticipation, initially struggled to comprehend what their eyes were telling them. One by one, stretchers with wounded men were being carefully lowered from the impossible heights, not by a large team, but seemingly by an unseen, tireless, solitary figure, defying every logical expectation. Confusion rippled through the ranks, quickly giving way to astonished silence. How could this be? They had retreated, leaving comrades for dead, a grim necessity of war. Yet here were dozens emerging from death's jaws. As numbers grew and stories from bewildered but grateful survivors pieced together, a single name whispered through the camp. Doss. The conscientious objector, the man they had mocked, had stayed behind. He faced the enemy, darkness and overwhelming odds alone, armed only with faith and unwavering determination to save lives. Initial disbelief transformed into overwhelming awe and profound, almost reverential, respect. Officers and enlisted men alike, hardened by combat, found themselves speechless. The man once dismissed as peculiar, even cowardly, had proven himself the embodiment of courage beyond comprehension. His actions weren't just heroic, they were miraculous, a testament to a spirit that refused to yield, even when all hope seemed lost. Each rescued soldier was a living monument to Doss's impossible vigil, a stark rebuttal to every doubt and taunt he had endured. As the final count solidified, an astonishing 75 men, some accounts say even more, the full scope of his solitary mission became undeniably clear. 75 lives plucked from death's precipice, carried from the very maw of the enemy by one man in one night. The sheer audacity, physical endurance, and moral fortitude required for such a feat were simply staggering. It was a tale that would echo through military history, a legend born not from bullets and bombs, but from ropes, stretchers, and an unshakable belief in the sanctity of every human life. From that moment, Desmond Doss was no longer just a medic. He was a symbol. His name, once a subject of scorn, now commanded instant, profound respect. The same superiors who had tried to court-martial him now stood in humbled admiration. His deeds on Hacksaw Ridge transcended the battlefield, becoming an enduring beacon of selflessness and courage. It was an act of unparalleled bravery that would not go unnoticed, culminating in the highest honor a soldier could receive, the Medal of Honor bestowed upon him by President Harry S. Truman, a recognition of a legend forged in the crucible of war against all odds by a man who simply refused to quit. After the war, Desmond Doss returned home, a quiet testament to the extraordinary power of conviction. The Medal of Honor, presented by President Truman, cemented his place in history, yet Doss remained profoundly humble, attributing his survival and actions to a higher power. His war injuries, however, were profound and lasting. Tuberculosis, contracted during service, led to the loss of a lung and 5 ribs, marking a long, arduous struggle with health that would plague him for the rest of his life. Despite these burdens, his spirit remained unbroken, his faith unwavering, a living embodiment of the principles he had so fiercely defended. He sought a quiet existence, dedicated to family and church, always carrying the weight of the men he'd saved. His life post-Hacksaw Ridge was a continuation of that unwavering commitment. Desmond Doss became a symbol of moral courage. He spent his later years sharing his story, not for self-glorification, but to inspire others with messages of faith, service, and the sanctity of life. He emphasized standing firm in one's convictions, even against ridicule or impossible odds. His quiet dignity and profound humility disarmed even the most cynical, proving true strength lies not in aggression, but in peaceful, resolute adherence to one's moral compass. This was a man who lived his entire life by the same unshakable code. Desmond Doss's actions fundamentally redefined heroism. In a war of unimaginable brutality, he chose a different path, proving valor could be found not just in taking lives, but in saving them. He demonstrated an unarmed medic, driven by compassion and unyielding faith, could achieve extraordinary feats. His story underscored a profound truth. The greatest acts of bravery are often those undertaken with kindness as the primary motivator, a shield of selflessness against chaos. He showed the world that true strength is not physical might, but the moral fortitude to uphold principles, even when standing alone. Beyond the battlefield, Doss's legacy resonates with a broader, universal message about humanity. His story is a powerful testament to the extraordinary impact an individual can have when guided by unwavering conviction and selfless love. It challenges us to look within, to find the courage to live by our values, even when they diverge from the norm. His refusal to compromise beliefs, even under threat of court-martial or death, serves as a timeless reminder that integrity and compassion are not weaknesses, but powerful forces. The human spirit, anchored by purpose, can transcend the most horrific circumstances. Today, the legacy of Desmond Doss continues to inspire. His story remains a beacon of hope and a potent reminder of individual choice. It encourages us to embrace kindness, stand up for what is right, and believe in miracles even in the darkest times. Hacksaw Ridge is not just a battleground, it is a monument to an ordinary man who, through extraordinary faith and courage, became an emblem of unarmed valor. His life teaches that true heroism is triumph over fear, driven by an unshakable commitment to human dignity. Desmond Doss, the conscientious objector, forever etched his name into history, not by taking a life, but by saving so many.